Hey gang, beautiful day, got my console going. I'm about to dig in and do some work on some sessions, but I thought I'd talk to you a little bit. I promised the Devendra Banhart story of doing little boxes for the Song of America. This was a very, very interesting session. I was really happy that he agreed to do the track for the compilation. I was a fan of Devendra's work. I had owned a couple of his albums, maybe 3 at that point. And so we were like, wow, this is great. He agreed, and he was touring. So he was coming through Nashville, and we had the Castle, which is one of my favorite studios out near Franklin, just outside of Nashville proper. And they pulled up in their tour bus. And I say they because there was like 15 people on that bus. There was Noah Georgeson and a bunch of people from other bands. I'm trying to remember. There was a few young ladies that were in a band that were touring with them. Jenny Lewis and a few. Anyway, 15 people pulled up. And they all wanted to take showers. Can't blame them. So they came in, and he says to me, super nice guy. And he says, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, well, the song? And he's like, yeah, we went over it, and I think I've got it figured out on guitar. And I was like, cool, so how do you want to do this? And he's like, well, and he's got a whole band with him. I mean, there's 15 people, but some of those people are in his band, his touring band. And he goes, well, let me go out into the studio, and it's a big room at the Castle. It's beautiful and very high ceilings. He says, let me just, set me up, and I'll just do it by myself. And I'm like, okay, you want to do it by yourself? I'm cool with that. I wasn't going to tell anybody how to approach these songs. I would help guide them. I would be as producerly as necessary, but not ever tell anybody what to do because they're the artist. So we set him up, put a really good microphone on his voice, another really good one on his guitar. He sat in the middle of the big room, and he let it rip. One take. Nailed it. Vocal, guitar. He even kept playing so that there was like a little outro, just instrumentally. Done. And I was like, okay, cool, man. So is there anything else you want to do? And he's like, yeah. And he points at me, he goes, you go play piano on this. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you go play piano. He goes, you can play piano, right? And I'm like, well, sorta. Yeah, I mean, that was my first instrument, but I've never played it on a professional Nashville recording session. I would get somebody much better, like Catherine Marks or Bobby Woods. So I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. I mean, you don't say no. You just, yeah, I can do that. I mean, this is a great lesson to learn. So I went out there, and Rich, the engineer, Rich Feaster, who's an amazing artist now, he's full-time painter and is incredible. You should find his work because it's going to be super valuable someday. Rich looks at me and goes, and I'm like, I don't know, just mic up the piano. So we mic up the piano, and you do what you do as a musician. You get musicianly, And I just sat there, and I went, and I can't really explain it, but this is a great lesson for everybody. I just figured out something really quick because you don't have time. You got to do it fast, and it's got to be cool, and it's got to be good. And I didn't want to play like double what he was doing, so I just figured out a part really fast, and we rolled. And I played piano all the way through, like whatever it is, 6 minutes. And, I tried to change it a little bit, but, I'm not Rick Wakeman or whoever else you think is a great keyboard player. I'm just, I was just doing my job. And I was playing both hands, but keeping it simple, keeping it musical. And it worked. And when I was done, Devendra said, "That's great. Now go play bass." Go play bass? You want me to play bass? Yeah, go play bass on it. And I was like, okay. And this is another lesson, I just so happen to have my acoustic bass. I owned an acoustic bass at that time, a big Washburn acoustic bass, which quite frankly was actually a pretty good sounding bass plugged in. And it didn't sound like an electric exactly because it was an acoustic bass. It was, semi-hollow body. And a lot of my friends liked it, so I always kept it. But this is the lesson. I brought it to the session. I brought all my instruments to the session because I didn't know what he needed, but they weren't really for me to play. I just wanted to be prepared for whatever he threw at me so that we had instruments, we had possibilities, we had options. So I played bass. And I played bass. So, and then he said to his drummer, "Okay, now you go add some drums." So he set up his drum kit. No click track, by the way. There is no click track on this stuff. You really got to hear this track. And so he set up his drums, and kind of beautifully, actually, I don't remember the guy's name, but he did kind of like a free-formy, kind of vibey thing where he kept time to the stuff we'd already done, but it wasn't boom, to boom, because that wouldn't have been proper either. It was kind of color, but also it was kind of like the way a jazz guy would approach it, or gal. And it worked perfectly. So then I think Noah Georgeson or somebody else overdubbed some Ebo stuff, but then he wanted to do background vocals. And that meant everybody, including me, everybody, all 15 of us in a room on one mic, singing little boxes, over and over again, and doubling it. We might even tripled it. And that's the track. And it went on the Song of America. It was one of the more popular songs. About less than a year later, I don't think it was quite a year, I was a big fan of the TV show Weeds, because Mary Louise Parker and I follow each other, well, on what used to be Twitter. Don't ask me why, but I love her, but she was following me, so I followed back. And I was a big fan of the show. And I wasn't thinking the show has a different version of Little Boxes every season. Sometimes every show, but sometimes for a few shows in a row. And they got in touch and said, "Hey, would you be okay with this?" And I was like, "Would I be okay with this? This would be amazing. I would love to do that." So I got in touch with Devendra and I was like, "Well, it's your call." And he's like, No, it's your call. You're the producer." And I was like, "I say yes." And so we told them yes. So to have that all come full circle from just us having fun and playing in the studio and really organically developing this, I mean, you can't be much more organic than how we did this, which is how we did a lot of the Song of America. When we did the Black Crowes track, that was live with no click track, and a lot of the other ones, the Mavericks, and I know John Mellencamp just played straight through by himself on his track. So organic, that's what we were going for. That's what we got. So it's still one of my favorite tracks to this day because of how much fun it was and how unexpected the session was. I'm glad I was prepared. I wasn't prepared for everything I was asked to do, but that's the great lesson as a musician. Just be ready. Just be ready and don't say no. Just say, "Yeah, I can do that," and fake it till you make it, because if you're musical and you have good taste, it might just work out. So check out Little Boxes by Devendra Banhart, and you'll hear my meager meanderings going on in the background. All right? Thanks, gang.